Hello, my name is Justin Banton and welcome back to another episode of the House of Trade. Today we're going to discuss France's changing role in Africa, re-evaluating military presence and their global influence. France's decade-long military involvement in Africa is undergoing a significant transformation, and many say good riddance, about time too. The French president made a decision recently to withdraw troops from Niger, signalling the end of an era characterized by French military interventions in the West African Sahel region and a sense in Paris that its former African colonies were part of its private sphere of influence. This shift has far-reaching implications, raising questions about the future of French troops in Africa, the fate of its military bases, and the ongoing fight against Islamist terrorism in the region. In the wake of these changes, calls are growing louder, both among observers and within French diplomatic circles, for a comprehensive re-evaluation of how France engages with African nations at all, including a reduction in its military presence across the continent. So what does this mean, and is this new defiant stance going to be a harbinger for further repercussions? Well, for over 2 months, President Macron maintained a defiant stance in the face of the junta in Niger, which seized power in July following a military coup. The junta demanded the removal of French troops stationed in the country to combat terrorism. However, France refused to engage with the junta leaders or concede to their demands, but in this standoff it was Paris that ended up blinking first. On a Sunday, Macron announced that France would gradually withdraw its 1,500 troops from Niger by year's end, and the French ambassador, who had been living under quasi-house arrest in the capital of Niamey, would return home. The ambassador returned with 6 colleagues as well. This withdrawal followed similar exits from neighbouring Burkina Faso and Mali. So what are the ripple effects? Well, the repercussions of France's withdrawal from Niger resonate widely, signifying a broader pattern of setbacks for Paris and the region. France's influence has been waning, and in some instances, Russia has stepped in to fill the void. This changing landscape reflects former colonies' efforts to diversify their partnerships. Several key questions arise from these developments. Where would the troops stationed in Niger be redeployed? What will become of France's remaining military bases in Africa? How will the fight against Islamist terrorism in the regions continue? And how will France continue without milking Africa for all of its resources? These questions have prompted discussions, even within the French diplomatic community, about the need for France to fundamentally reshape its engagement with African nations, treating them with more humanity as equals rather than serfs of their fiefdoms post-colonization. So what does the redefining relationship with Africa actually mean? Well, President Macron had previously promised a new form of military relationship with African nations, one that would be devoid of neo-colonialist undertones and based on equality and partnership. What are the 3 words that sum up France, or supposedly sum up France? Libertarian, egalitarian, blah blah blah, whatever. It doesn't extend to African nations, it seems. This vision aimed to reset France's Africa strategy, where it could and would collaborate with local governments to combat terrorism. But many have been questioning this Africa strategy, in not only the hubristic nature to actually have an Africa strategy, considering the jaded and disillusioned past that France poses in Africa. How dare they, some may say, come under the guise of fighting terrorism when we truly know that the Central African franc is what truly controls Francophile countries in Africa? Well, currently, France has approximately 6,700 soldiers deployed across the African continent, with a significant presence in countries like Chad, Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Gabon. In the Sahel region, Paris has consistently emphasized that its armed forces were present at the request of host governments, combating a jihadist insurgency. Do you see the same thematics here? The same optics, the same use of language, combating terrorism. However, despite these justifications, the ease with which military juntas in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, as well as rival powers like Russia, have fueled anti-French sentiment, underscores a profound disconnect between France's vision and local realities. So, why has their presence become counterproductive other than the obvious, ironic and uncomfortable, awkward truths of post-colonial expansionism? Well, experts argue that France's military presence has become counterproductive, with mounting opposition from local populations. While France continues to frame its missions as assisting governments in combating jihadist threats, it faces a growing perception that its presence is fueling instability, discord, and a fertile ground for corruption, pillaging, and raping of African lands. Unlike French troops stationed in Eastern Europe who primarily engage in surveillance and training missions, those in the Sahel region are involved in combat operations. This fundamental difference has exacerbated tensions and fueled anti-French sentiment among local populations. This is a very sensitive issue for France. Oh, poor them. The Sahel debacle has struck a sensitive chord among France's political elites, fueling fears that the country is losing its status as a global power. Poor France. The debate has been so significant that Macron has promised opposition parties a public debate with lawmakers on France's Sahel policy, potentially taking place as early as November. Now, I must remind listeners that France's Africa policy is very ironic and also quite barbaric when you consider France's attitude towards African immigrants is in its own borders, where African people and people of black descent in France are treated like second-class citizens. So it is mightily ironic that they are standing up for quote-unquote humanitarian reasons in the African region now, when it is so irreconcilable, incongruent to their own treatment of people back home. There is a palpable sense among the French political establishment that their military presence in the Sahel region was one of the last symbols of France's hard power and its self-perception as a great world power. And this is what's key, its self-perception. These ideas of grandeur, these imperial legacy issues which they seem unable to let go of or forego. But what is the new chapter? Well, in light of these developments, France will need to come to terms with the reality that it will have less control over the events in the Sahel region, including the fight against terrorism. Paris must adopt a new, less militarized approach in engaging with African governments across the continent. Redeploying troops from Niger to other African countries would only delay the inevitable transformation in France's relationship with Africa. And boy, do they need a relationship with Africa. Just imagine the disproportionate relationship, the unequal ideas, the unequal strategic gains from each counterparty in this relationship. It truly is a relationship of inequality, where France are able to, via their large military, their geopolitical presence, their technological advancements, and their entrenched political structures, they're really able to exploit, extract, and manipulate African nations. For France, this transition represents more than just a change in policy. It marks the beginning of a new chapter in its historical engagement with Africa, one that seeks to align with the evolving dynamics of the continent while leaving behind the vestiges of a bygone era. Are they able to actually adapt? Are they able to actually change? Will this be the first and last coup in Francophile countries over the course of the next few years? I doubt it. But at the House of Trade, we are here to keep abreast of these movements and the repercussions, the ramifications they have for financial markets and for people on the ground. So if you enjoyed this episode, please do like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Ciao for now.